So we're talking about scar endometriosis. And before we go to scar endometriosis, we need to know what is endometriosis. Endometriosis, we all know, is ectopic endometrium. That is endometrium which is located outside the uterus. So we all know the most common site is the ovary, where you have the endometriomas or chocolate cyst. Then you can have endometriotic spots on the fallopian tube. You can have endometriosis in the pouch of Douglas. You can have deep infiltrating rectovaginal endometriosis. You can even have endometriosis in rarer sites like in the intestine or in the even in the pleura, the liver. Those are very rare sort of endometriosis. Something which is more common than those rare ones is something called as scar endometriosis. Now, scar endometriosis basically means that this ectopic endometrium has now entered a surgical scar site. That's why it's also called as surgical site endometriosis is another name. Another name is incisional endometrioma. So if you encounter these terms, don't get confused. They all mean the same thing. Surgical scar endometriosis, incisional endometrioma all mean scar endometriosis. That means in a scar, a surgical scar, usually that is a scar of episiotomy or a cesarean. These are the two most common types. Other scars also, which we will come to see, you find that ectopic endometrium has entered there, endometrial glands have, and stroma has entered there, and it has picked up vascularity in that area and it starts growing. So this is what is scar endometriosis. So it's a rare form of extra pelvic endometriosis and occurs in those incisions where the endometrial tissue might come into contact. Now, amongst all of them, I told you the cesarean scar is the most common, followed by episiotomy scar. But remember, most of the time, if you do encounter this, I have seen around in my 17 years of practice, I have seen about 10 cases of scar endometriosis. So approximately one, and nowadays I'm seeing it more frequently. We'll understand that also. Why is it more frequent now? But you'll see roughly 1 in 6 months, you'll come across a scar patient with scar endometriosis. So cesarean section scar is the most common site, and roughly the prevalence is it varies depending on different studies from point as low as 0.03% to 1%. Roughly, you can remember mid value would be 0.5%. This is again for the exam if you want to have a perfect answer. You can roughly remember a mid value. Now, why does this scar endometriosis happen? Okay, so the most obvious theory is that when you are doing a surgery, for example, you're doing a cesarean section, what happens is you deliver the baby, you deliver the placenta. You sometimes we clean the endometrial cavity. Those of you who've done cesareans would know many people have this practice of putting a sponge on a stick or on a sponge holder and cleaning the uterine cavity and then taking that sponge holder with the gauze on top outside. Now, when you are removing the placenta, when you're removing this cleaning with a mop or a sponge mounted, you're cleaning the inside of the uterine cavity and coming out. What can happen is that there is some endometrial tissue, okay, which and this will be very, it may not even be macroscopic, it's microscopic. It somehow gets onto the edge of the wound, okay, and it could be at any level, right from the skin to subcutaneous tissue to even deeper down in the rectus sheath. It can be in any level, okay, of wound closure, and it starts getting vascularity from there and it starts growing as an endometriotic nodule. So this is the most accepted theory, that the transport theory. So the transport theory, which explains that iatrogenic implantation. Iatrogenic means we are doing it. It's because of our surgery that this has happened. Implantation of hormone sensitive endometrial tissue to the edge of the wound during the abdominal or pelvic surgery, followed by hormone mediated changes in those implanted endometrium. Right. Another hypothesis is that there is some so endometriosis is also attributed to be a chronic inflammatory condition, Right. So there's diminished NK cell immunity. Normally, what happens if some ectopic endometrium gets deposited somewhere, the body will take care. The fact that that endometrial gland is able to grow, that it's able to get vascularization, is because of a diminished natural killer cell immunity. And this is another theory. But the transport theory remains. Transport theory may basically वो clear नहीं हो पा रहा है, and it's just lodged there and starts growing. So this is why it happens. And as I said, the most common site is I didn't write the most common site here because I told about it before, but just add it here. Most common site is a cesarean section, but then we also see it in an episiotomy site, in a hysterectomy, especially if you've done an open hysterectomy, even laparoscopic hysterectomy, sometimes at the port sites. In laparoscopic gynae surgeries, many times at the port site, you develop, the woman comes with repeated pain at the laparoscopic port sites, and you're not able to reach a diagnosis. She's very uncomfortable, and then you realize that this might be scar endometriosis. Following a hysterotomy, even following an ectopic pregnancy, although in ectopic pregnancy, you're not likely to enter the endometrial cavity. Okay, but rarely this can happen. And tubal ligation, again, you're unlikely to enter the endometrial cavity. So these are rare, okay? But this can happen if the patient has concomitant endometriosis. So ectopic endometrium gets into another ectopic site. Okay, so that's how in when you're not entering the cavity, still it can happen if the patient already has endometriosis, pelvic endometriosis. Now, this picture has come blurred, but this is just from my patient around 5 6 months back. She is a nurse herself, and she had come with a huge fibroid. She was 40 years old, so we did a TLH and we preserved her ovaries. Okay. Now, when we did a TLH, because she had a huge, almost 28, 32 week size uterus, so we did a laparoscopic hysterectomy, but then specimen retrieval was very difficult. So for specimen retrieval, that is to take the uterus out, such a huge uterus, although we accomplished the surgery laparoscopically, to take that huge uterus out, we gave an incision on the abdomen, a fan and seal incision, and we took out the uterus through that fan and seal incision. Now, we give a very small incision actually, and we had to morcellate the uterus through that incision. Now, this patient came to me around 6 months later, and she said, Ki, I am fine, everything is good. She came for a follow-up in between also, everything was fine. She just developed a hypertrophic scar. You can see the scar here is hypertrophic. And then she said, but I just look at my wound, there is a bluish spot on the one edge of the wound. And she's a nurse, so she was very aware of things. And she said, every time it doesn't pain, but only certain days I feel very uncomfortable. It hurts, बहुत ज़्यादा pain होता है, enough that she has to take painkillers. And she said when the pain is there, this nodule becomes more prominent. This was a bluish nodule. So as soon as you see this should immediately run in your mind that this is scar endometriosis. Now it was a very difficult morcellation, so that's why the probably endometrium got there. And we had left her ovaries behind because she was just 40 years old. So we had just done a TLH, a total laparoscopic hysterectomy. So what was happening was every month ovulation was happening, and at the time of menstruation uterus was not there, but the ectopic endometrial glands here would bleed, and that would cause her immense pain. So right now we've put her on medical management, but we do plan to, because the final, we'll come to this in treatment, the final treatment is of course excision. Medical management is only temporary. So this is just one example, okay, of how scar endometriosis can happen. And this patient presented after a hysterectomy. So this is what happens now. So basically the endometrial implant typically appears either as a deep lying. I had another patient who had a cesarean section elsewhere, and this was her abdomen, and this was the scar. She had an endometriotic nodule quite far away from the phalansteal scar, and the same typical history. cyclical pain during her periods. It worsens. Then it was, and we finally diagnosed it as scar endometriosis, but it was surprisingly 5 centimeters above her in skin incision. So how it reached there, God only knows. But it, what I mean, it was very deep seated. It was not superficial. So as I said, it can be happen in any of the layers. So it could be a deep seated or a subcutaneous nodule infiltrating the fascia and the muscle, or it could be only limited to the skin. Like this patient, only it was in the skin. When we did her MRI, it was only limited to the superficial layers. But it can even go up to the rectus sheath, the underlying rectus muscle. Sometimes it's even going inside the peritoneal cavity. Bleeding into the tissue during menstruation causes typically cyclical local pain, tenderness, and discoloration, like I showed, that bluish discoloration. In cases of superficial nodule, like what I showed you, you can clearly see the bleeding, and sometimes ulceration is appreciable. And this is a very, very classic history. Although this classic history is present only around 30-40% of patients, but when they do say this, it's very obvious what it is. Symptoms, this is a classic triad is written, but I found this classic triad term given only in one or two articles. So scar, acha, before I continue, I always tell you where where are what are the references of my topic. To be honest, I went through all the books, including Teelands and all the gynae important books that we have. Nowhere is it given more than a paragraph. In most of the major books, it's not even given at all. So this lecture is a compilation of different articles that I went through, and it's not given well anywhere. That's another important reason why I'm teaching this topic, because कहीं पे अच्छे से नहीं दिया हुआ है, and in the exam you'll be searching here and there. So I'm putting everything together, and I'll upload the notes also for this topic tomorrow. Okay. Now, so the classical triad is cyclical pain plus a palpable nod. So this is the first one. So pain, a nodule, and catamenial swelling. Catamenial swelling. Yeah, it's a 10-mark question. Thank you, Tejaswini. In MD also exam, it's important, and DNB also, it's come in the past. So it's a very important question. Plus catamenial. Catamenial, the word catamenial means related to periods. Okay, near a prior scar. So it's not necessarily cyclical. As I said, only 40% will have cyclical. It may be non-cyclical in some. Then perineal episiotomy scars. Uh, the patient will have either so it could either be a pain or a nodule in a abdominal scar, or a perineal episiotomy scar, and she can have cyclical pain, dyspareunia, or a tender nodule in the episiotomy line. Another common site is the episiotomy. And the third common site is in the port side lesion. So this triad is actually a triad of different sites, okay, where all it can happen in a prior abdominal scar, an episiotomy scar, or in a port side lesion. Whenever you have this typical history, always consider scar endometriosis. Now, how do we describe on examination? The typical symptoms is quite obvious. The painful swelling following a surgical, near a surgical scar, and typically it will be cyclical. Every month she'll have pain. But on examination, so again, same thing, usually a longer Pfannenstiel scar if it's a cesarean or episiotomy or laparoscopy. The size can vary from small to even very, very large nodules. It may even distort the scar. Okay, I had a patient a few years back who had two cesareans, and she said she actually bleeds from the scar during her periods. And she came, we told her, come to us during your periods. And she actually had to put a dressing over her scar during her periods because there was so much endometrial tissue. The entire scar site had scar endometriosis. We even presented this paper. So we did a deep excision, and it was the entire, from the uterus till the abdominal wall, there was an entire scar endometriosis. So it was a very extensive, it went intraperitoneal also, right from the uterine scar till the skin. So then the shape depends. Usually it's a irregular round or oval swelling. The color can be normal, bluish, brownish, or hyperpigmented. And the changes on the scar could be thickened, puckered, occasionally discolored. Okay, and like I showed you, and as I said, a bleeding point, you actually might see that bleeding point, like I showed you, or the patient who came to us, which is a very important diagnostic clue. It is usually not a mobile swelling. It is usually adhered to or adherent to underlying tissue. During that period time, she will have, it will be markedly tender. So it will be very tender, irregular, usually oval swelling tethered to underlying tissue. And as I said, cyclical changes are very, very typical. 40% of patients will have this typical history of cyclical swelling. Now, what is the diagnosis? How will you arrive at a diagnosis? Wait. Okay, so the diagnosis, whenever you have, and always keep in mind this high degree of clinical suspicion, but whenever it comes to your mind, usually the first thing we want is an ultrasound. The most easily accessible investigation is obviously an ultrasound. And because of the easy accessibility, we usually get not a deep ultrasound done, we get a superficial ultrasound and what we say ultrasound of the parietes. So this is where we use the linear probe, and you can see either a hypoechoic, if it's a fresh nodule which is more of blood, you will see a blackish lesion, that is hypoechoic. But if it's an older lesion, you might see it as a heteroechoic, or a heterogeneous mass in the subcutaneous or muscle plane. But wherever you see it, it's usually near the scar. It may show internal foci of hemorrhage or small cystic areas. The margins are usually irregular, borders are spiculated. Doppler will show vascularity. Okay, and when you try to move the nodule with pressure or from the ultrasound probe, you will find it will not move. So it's basically attached to that underlying scar tissue. And pain, that is sonopalpation sign, that is pain during probe compression, is highly suggestive of scar endometriosis. Sonopalpation means you're palpating with the sonograph, with the ultrasound probe. And if she has pain at that time, it is, so basically it's a tender swelling, which can be elicited even at the time of doing an ultrasound. So this is what you'll find on ultrasound. The gold standard, however, like in this patient, she had easy access to an MRI at her hospital. The nurse I'm talking about, I directly told her to get an MRI because I was pretty much certain that this is a scar endometriosis. An MRI would help me tell me the depth. Okay, like because we have eventually planned surgery for her, so I would know how deep I can be expected to go by an MRI. So an MRI is the gold standard. It is indicated in deep or large lesions, and very importantly in pre-operative planning. So if you're confused about the diagnosis, if the diagnosis is in doubt, and if it's a very large lesion, to know the extent, and for pre-operative planning, so you know how you don't have any surprises, because you may even anticipate having to enter the peritoneal cavity. So pre-operative planning is important. And also, if you suspect multiple lesions which an ultrasound may have missed, then an MRI is of course the best. I put these down here, they'll be there in the notes, but I don't think they're important. What will you see on a T1 weighted image, a T2? It's more important for the radiology residents than you. Okay, but you can appreciate a lesion, the lesion and its extent very clearly on the MRI. Now, also, I've written here gold standard again, because this is also gold standard. This is also gold standard because eventually, by doing a biopsy, is the final diagnosis. You know actually what it is by doing a biopsy. So whether you do an FNAC, or better still take a actual biopsy from that lesion, and this is usually done in a patient where you are in the back of your mind, you're thinking कि कहीं ये malignant तो नहीं है, is it a malignancy? That is when you would rather do an FNAC or a biopsy before, or rather than just relying on a MRI. So if you have a high suspicion of malignancy, then you go ahead and do an FNAC or a biopsy. Or if you're still unsure of the diagnosis despite the scan and the MRI, then you do this. So FNAC is just a needle biopsy, is just a needle cytology, and histopathology is of course better than an FNAC. But in both, what will you see? You'll see the presence of endometrial glands. You'll see the presence of endometrial stroma. You'll see a lymphocytic infiltrate because it's an inflammatory condition. Lymphocytic infiltrate. And very importantly, which you should all know, even in endometriosis, we would have read, you have hemosiderin laden macrophages. So this is what are the four typical things, and this is not only for scar endometriosis. These are the biopsy findings in any endometriosis. It's important. It is an important OSCE question also. They'll give you a question, they'll show you endometriosis clinical scenario, and they'll ask you the what are the findings on the pathologist will find on HP. So you should know what to write: endometrial glands, endometrial stroma, which is obvious, lymphocytic infiltrate, and hemosiderin laden macrophages. Additionally, there is some role of CA125. We know this is important also in endometriosis. Also, it's raised. Since this is a type of endometriosis, it's expected to be raised here also. Just then, diagnostic laparoscopy can be considered if the patient has or you are suspecting pelvic endometriosis also. Suppose she's a known case of endometriosis. Suppose you are anyway planning surgery. Suppose she has a chocolate cyst. So you already know she has endometriosis and you're anyway planning a laparoscopy for her. And if she has scar endometriosis, that can be tackled alongside. Okay. So a PET CT is again important, like we did a biopsy if we suspect malignancy. Here also, this is important. If you're suspecting malignancy, then a PET CT in rare cases may be considered, not routine. So these are done only in certain situations. Now, as I said, management, remember the definitive management is surgery. Okay, there is no role for medical management in if you want definitive treatment. If the patient comes and asks me, ma'am, iska final management batao, then you will. So the patient I was telling you about, she had previous two cesareans and she wanted a third baby. So I told her, you complete your family at the time of the third cesarean. We will excise the endometriotic nodule, and that's what we. I mean, I'm waiting for her to get pregnant and come back to me, but that is what the plan is for her. So surgical medical treatment is only for temporary relief. Definitive management is surgical management. So management should aim for complete removal of ectopic endometrial tissue, pain relief because that's the primary symptom, prevention of recurrence, and of course, exclusion of malignancy, which is very rare. Pre-op evaluation is, of course, an MRI is ideal because you want to know the extent of the lesion. But even usual pre-op investigations, blood workup, rule out comorbidities, all that you can mention in your theory answer if you get a question on this. Important steps during surgery. First of all, anesthesia. If it's a small nodule, regional, local can also do, but general anesthesia is preferred for deep or large lesions. Then the incision planning, remember, there should be an elliptical incision around the lesion with a margin of 1 centimeter of healthy tissue, which is visible with the naked eye. You can make out the healthy tissue at least 1 centimeter margin. Sharp dissection through the tissue, maintaining hemostasis, identify by palpation and excise the entire nodule involving, if it's involving rectus, muscle, fascia, whatever required, excise the entire nodule. 1 centimeters of normal tissue ideally should be removed, and then closure of the defect. If it's a small defect, usually primary closure is enough. But if it's a large defect, like suppose involving the rectus sheath more than 3 centimeters, or it's going inside intraperitoneal, sometimes a mesh repair, you might have to call the surgeon and even do a mesh repair. Put in a drain if if it's a large raw area. Okay, and always send the specimen for biopsy for confirmation and for ruling out malignancy. So this is again a very important table. What are the steps or what are the precautions you will take during surgery? Okay, so this is the same thing, important surgical points. Now, medical management is the same. It's exactly same as pelvic endometriosis. So the indications for medical management is if you want temporary relief. Okay, say she wants to plan pregnancy and then get the surgery done, or she's not willing for surgery, or she's postponing it for some reason, or she's not willing, then only medical management. What all can you give? You can give combined contraceptive pills. You can give progestins like Dynogest or medroxyprogesterone acetate. These are the two common ones we give. You can give GnRH agonists like Leuprolide, and I'm not going into details here because this is again covered under endometriosis. Very recently, we have something called as oral GnRH antagonists. The common one available for this reason is something called as elagolix. I'm sure most of you have heard of this drug. It's very, very, very new. It's an oral GnRH antagonist. The mechanism of action is similar to agonist, but in agonist there will be an initial flare up of FSH-LH and then down regulation. That flare up is not here, and the dose which we give is lesser. So this prevents the severe bone loss which we see with GnRH agonists. So bone loss is not as severe, so you can give it for a longer time. Okay, so although there are hypoestrogenic side effects, but they're not as severe as leuprolide. The only problem with elagolix is it's only approved for treatment of pelvic endometriosis. Scar endometriosis comes under extrapelvic endometriosis, so it may be used off label, okay, but it's not recommended for scar endometriosis. Then we have aromatase inhibitors and danazol, which nobody uses anymore because of the extreme androgenic side effects. So mainly what we give for normal endometriosis, you can also give for scar endometriosis. Emerging minimally invasive therapies, not much. I just found a few papers on this. They are not the standard treatment recommendations, but yes, they can be tried. If the patient doesn't want surgical treatment but wants something which will give her more long lasting relief than medical, you can consider, if you have a good radiology setup, you can consider high intensity focused ultrasound like we give for fibroids. Same you can give here because this will cause coagulative necrosis of the ectopic tissue, and we can also ablate though that tissue, especially if it's very superficial. We can even use there have been reports of using radio frequency ablation, but as I said, they are not standard. These are not standard at all. They're just a few case reports which I found in the literature. Very important is prevention. Now, I told you in the beginning, I'm seeing a lot of scar endometriosis, which was not there before, because we need to understand that there's a lot of importance on how you do the surgery. How we prevent this? Some important points are: number one, many people have this habit. I have this habit at the time of cesarean section, I exteriorize the uterus. Okay. This is not before incision, sorry. This is before uh, during closure. So when I'm closing the uterus, I always have the uterus exteriorized, that is outside the abdomen. This is because this allows me more space. First of all, I don't do it primarily to prevent scar endometriosis. I use it primarily because it gives me more access. I'm able to see the angles better. I'm able to visualize the field of incision better. But this also helps in preventing scar endometriosis because the uterus is outside. If there's any spillage of endometrial contents, it will not happen in the skin or the scar site area. It will be outside the abdomen. Secondly, and this one of my professors used to always tell me, Rena, never mop the uterine cavity from inside unless you have a doubt कि कुछ अंदर है. Many people routinely, and many people, I think majority of people will do a routine cleaning of the uterine cavity. with a sponge. But when you take that sponge holder out, be very careful where it's going. My professor used to tell me that this is increasing the incidence of two things cleaning the uterine cavity. One is if you do it very roughly, it can destroy the endometrium. It can lead to placenta accreta. And the second thing he used to tell me was it can lead to scar endometriosis. Okay, so avoid sponges as much as possible. Even if you're using a sponge to clean the uterine cavity, make sure it doesn't touch the abdominal wall. Irrigation of the incision site. I've seen many people do this routinely in practice with saline before closure. This will remove any contaminants. Like we clean the peritoneal cavity, also nicely irrigate with saline the abdominal site also. Another thing which many people do, and I think it's a very good point, is use separate sutures and separate instruments for uterine and abdominal wall layers. Many times, I'm sure many of you have done this, is uterine closure के time जो vicryl या जो भी suture use किया है, leftover suture is there, you will tell the nurse कि give me, I'll use this for closure of rectus or for subcutaneous tissue or even for skin. Now, what we don't realize is that suture material can Tejaswini, I just seeing your doubt, ectopic and utopic endometrium. I've never heard of the term utopic endometrium. I'll have to check myself. Okay. So closing, when you're using a suture to close the uterine cavity, never use that suture for anything else because that suture goes through the decidua. You can easily end up with endometriotic implants elsewhere. Closure of peritoneum is controversial. It's a very big controversy whether you should close or not. But one of the points of those people who close, one of in favor of those people who close the peritoneum, is it can reduce seeding into the abdominal wall. And very important, I'm sure many of you do this. I do this routinely. Always change the gloves before closing the skin. I change the gloves twice. One is once the baby and placenta is out. I because all the sometimes there's meconium, there's vernix, there's a lot of and many times these patients are emergency cesareans. She's had PROM. So when you take the baby out and you put your hand in the uterine cavity, and especially if the patient has been in labor, always change your gloves after. That's one time when I change my gloves. And the second time I change my gloves is during skin closure. Again, for the purpose of, although it's very far-fetched, but it can happen. It is, as I said, it's logical, not evidence proven, but it's sort of become a habit now. Okay, so this is another thing which will help prevent scar endometriosis. So again, a very important table. Okay, so that ends the class. Take home messages which you should take home are prevention. Of course, this table is important. Key steps during surgery. This is important. Okay, and clinical features, this table, the symptoms and the signs of endometriosis, of scar endometriosis.